Hi everyone and welcome to my little craft corner. I am Tabby and today we will continue with my journal for 2026. In the last video I created the cover, so feel free to have a look. I will link it down in the description box. And today or at least I want to fill it, of course, with a little inner life. I have already prepared one page here because, as I said last time, we haven't really made the actual spine yet, so that's why I folded an A4 sheet to A5. Of course, all of my papers will be around that size, so I roughly know where this should end. And I mark it with a pencil here. Of course, you don't have to follow the DIN A standard, just use the papers and pages that fit best for you. I just mark it roughly to check if it's wide enough for our signatures. I could also go a little further over here, round about that width. This will later become our spine. I draw this a bit more precisely. And then I have to check it again because I said I would like to have 6 signatures. So my signatures need to fit here. However, they won't be very thick, so it should work. Okay, I will calculate that quickly and then I'll be back. I did it like I always do. I cut a piece of squared paper to the width and height of the spine, and here I mark where my signatures should sit. Today I would like to use a 7-hole pamphlet stitch. Of course, you can also use a 3-hole pamphlet stitch or 5 or as many as you want. To find the height of the individual holes, I simply fold my paper in half, and this gives me the center. If I only wanted to do a 3-hole pamphlet stitch, I would fold it in half again, and then I would have the height for those 3 holes. But as I said, I want to go for 7 today, so I just fold it again, and so I don't really have to measure a lot because I can clearly see where the holes should go. I already marked the width with a pencil, but I think I'll repeat it with a black pen so you can see it a bit better. At the edges, I'll leave half a centimeter on each side, so here at the left and here at the right. And then I will sew in the signatures with a gap of 1 centimeter each. And now I need to mark all these lines here. Just in case you don't use the metric system, here is the conversion in inches. Well, it's not important to me that the spaces at the top and the bottom are exactly the same, because at the end you won't see if it differs a little bit. Okay, now I'm done with marking the holes. And these are the dots where I will use my awl in a moment to poke all these holes and where I will later sew through. I also got myself a felt mat. I really like using it so I can poke through without damaging the craft mat underneath, or even worse, the cover. Yeah, so I'm finally done poking the holes, and I put the paper back in place again, and I also clamped it with these clips so that it doesn't slip around, and the paper also lies a little bit flatter. And now I put my felt mat underneath again. If you don't have a felt mat, you can of course also just hold the cover like this, but I personally find it easier to place it on something, or you can use any other material you don't really care about. For example, a piece of cardboard, just fold it several times so the all can go into that, so it doesn't have to be a felt hat. And now I just repeat the process. I poke these holes again, but now through the cover. But this time they should be a little bit wider, because later I will either use this thread or this one, and both are a bit thicker. If you mark and prepare everything beforehand, especially when you use squared paper, I find it becomes a lot easier, this whole sewing process. So now I remove the paper again. I will bring you a bit closer so you can see the holes a lot better I made there. And this is where the signatures will be later sewn in. You can put it aside now, and later on this will become our spine. Now we come to the part that I always find the most interesting when I put a journal together, choosing and arranging all of these papers. I sorted everything a little bit so I can group the papers by type. I start with these just normal coffee dyed papers, and as I said, I have 6 signatures. I also add completely torn and ripped papers. This one, for example, ripped while coffee dyeing because I was a little bit too impatient and didn't let it dry properly. But I actually really like that. And for me, it gives a certain character. Next, I add all these nature-related papers. What definitely goes in is this owl. I also really like these pages here, and I will trim them a little later. For each signature, I already prepared one of these. Next, we have these antique papers. As I told you before, I will also add some wallpaper, and I will cut this piece later, and this goes in here. And I also have this really beautiful paper here, or it is more like a milk bag actually, but I definitely want to use it in one of my signatures. I just add my papers here and there where I think they could fit nicely into the signatures or into the journal. I try to explain everything while I arrange the pages, so you can follow me and my process, or better to say my thinking process. But I have to say, it is not that easy to think about it and talk about it at the same time. Now I'm moving on to the more thinner papers, like this baking paper, for example. I will split this piece between these two signatures, and I already know that I want to have these papers inside my journal that are already stamped or stenciled on. So yeah, I just want to arrange them into my different signatures. I will also use this packaging paper and will split it between several signatures as well. Okay, the mandalas, they will definitely go in my journal. This is the first time I really want to include them in my signatures or into my journal. I just fold them roughly like this, And for the ones where the edges are really torn very crooked, I still need to cut off these edges. 3 of my signatures will get mandalas, not the ones that already have wallpaper, because that is already very thick and sturdy paper. So I put them into the ones without wallpaper. Yeah, I think I will only use 2 of these flowbook papers and leave the others out. Yeah, that's how I would get all of my signatures together. When I'm finished, I will come back to you. So, I have now roughly arranged the papers the way I want them. I'll show you very briefly. As I said, that is not final yet. As I already told you, I decided to alternate them. So I have 3 mandalas. So I do with mandala, without, with, without, with, without. And these are the smaller elements that will later be added to the pages, either as flip outs or flip ups or however you like. What I also like to do sometimes is to join some smaller pages together, for example with washi tape or with just another piece of paper, so that 2 separate pages become one combined page, so to say. For example, this is a rather small book page, and I think it would just get lost a little bit if I put it into the journal on its own. This is the first one I already put together. I also have pages with notes on it or scraps like these that I didn't end up using in other projects, but everything here is really just a base to paint on it, to decorate it, to whatever comes in my mind later on. So it doesn't really matter how it looks right now. Because when I start working with colors and collages, everything will be covered again. I will also show you proper flip through later. I just wanted to show you very roughly what my process looks like. Maybe it gives you some ideas about what you could use in your journal. So now I will trim the individual pages a little. For example, these were only roughly torn by hand. And why I usually like a slightly worn look, I don't really like these, how should I describe, these leftover fold lines here. I don't know, but I don't really like that. So now I will just tear them again with a ruler. And of course it doesn't matter if the front and the back are the same length or width, because they will be bound into the journal and won't lie exactly on top of each other. And even if they do, I think that's fine, because sometimes it looks quite nice when you can see the layers of the paper. Now I take my journal cover and check that all the pages will fit inside. If they don't, it doesn't necessarily mean I have to cut them. Sometimes I just fold them in to create tuck spots or fold outs, what makes the journal even more interesting and even more interactive. But I definitely don't want pages sticking out of the journal. Yes, so I take page by page and check if it will fit or not. And sometimes I will fold them lengthwise, even if the pages are really short then. And if I see the pages are still too big, I decide to fold them further or maybe just cut it off. This one took me a little bit longer because I liked how the length fit in the journal, but I didn't like to have the crease or the fold in the bird's or in the middle of the bird's face or the bird's body. So I decided to take it sideways and just fold it like that. And all of these pages of different sizes are the reason why I did not make a strict A5 journal and also made the cover a little bit taller. So I can have all of these pages in here and have a little bit more of a variety of taller and shorter pages. So now most of the pages are trimmed the way I needed them. What I still want or need to do is to join the smaller pages together. Sometimes I use washi tape, but I actually prefer using paper because I find it is harder to sew through washi tape because the needle always sticks to it a little bit, and it also doesn't fold as nicely as paper. But of course, washi tape also works. Well, I use some small leftover pieces from other projects and I trim the strip just roughly. It doesn't have to be very wide, just wide enough to cover both of your pages. And this one is about 1.5 inches or almost 6 centimeters. I place the pages together, add some glue, and that's how I create a double page. Here, for example, this page tore in a completely strange way, and there was also a tear that went over the fold of the page, so I just covered that with washi tape. Over here, I attach this envelope and use it as a fold out element, and for that I use washi tape. I place it on top to measure it, kind of, tear off a piece of the washi tape and just glue it on. But because I don't really trust washi tape for a long-term use, I also add some glue stick underneath, especially for things that will be folded again and again and has to withstand some stress. I would never rely only on the washi tape glue. And I will just repeat that for the other side. And I do the same for the other small pages. Okay, now I already have my first fold-out element, and the page will be bound in like that, so the envelope folds out slightly crooked, so to say. And yeah, I actually quite like that. Okay, this one doesn't want to hold yet, so I just have to add some more glue. And yeah, of course I have to cut off the excess. Yeah, so this is exactly how I will do it. And I will also repeat this with some other pages. So here is another page that I want to bind in like that. This one will fold to the right and this one to the left. And I will use the same washi tape because it is in the same signature. So it doesn't always have to cover the whole page, just enough to connect the main part. Another option is to sew pages together instead of gluing them. You just have to make sure that the pages overlap a little, I would say about 2 centimeters, and then you sew over it where the pages overlap, either with a sewing machine or by hand, by slow stitching. I also think that looks really nice, so that's another option as well. Right now I don't really feel like getting out the sewing machine and I'll just continue like this. So I will continue with connecting my pages and then I will be right back. So I have now put together all the small pages that I wanted to join, either with washi tape or with paper strips or by simply overlapping and gluing them together. And I have also already arranged my signatures. There are still a few loose pieces here. These are envelopes and similar things that I want to glue onto the pages later. I just assigned them to the signatures already so I know where they should go. And of course, you should always make sure that when you glue smaller pages together, they do not stick out beyond the edges of the journal. And I would also recommend, if you like tearing with a ruler instead of cutting, like I do, to do that before binding the pages in, because later, when everything is already bound into the journal, it becomes much more difficult. And finally, it's time to bind the pages in. And for that, we need our template from earlier again, the one where we marked the holes in the spine. Now it's the last opportunity to arrange all the pages the way I want to bind them into the signature. And I don't want this to be extremely neat. I prefer it to look a little bit more organic. I will use these longer paper clips, and if I have pages that are about the same size, I also like to use these sewing clips, but since I have so many different page sizes here, I use the paper clips to really fix everything. Yes, so I attach one at the top left and one at the bottom right, so nothing slips while I mark the holes. I just fold the signature again to have a nice crease before I mark everything. And what I have to do now is to mark the height of the holes in all of my 6 signatures. I will use a pencil for this, even though it might be a little bit harder for you to see, because I don't want to have any permanent marks in here later. But I will come a little closer so you can see the dots that I have drawn. So yeah, I'm right, 7 dots. I just counted them again. I thought about it for a moment, but I think I will mark everything first and then sew in the signatures afterwards. Here I also left a very short page on purpose that I can add projects or other pages throughout the year later on. And as you will see later on, no matter if the pages are shorter or longer, the many stitches will catch all of them. And now it's time for my felt mat again, just to poke the holes through my signatures. I just wanted to show you briefly how I sew the signatures, cause I will actually do the sewing part without the camera, because otherwise it is simply too much for me to handle. And if you would like to see a full tutorial for that, there are many other channels that show this very well. So I will take a sewing needle. In my case, it is a bookbinding needle because they are a little more stable than normal sewing needles. And I made 7 holes in this sample piece. I will measure about 4 times the height of my journal for the thread I'm taking, because I have never done the 7-hole pamphlet stitch before. I will just try if that length works well. So I prefer having a little too much thread rather than struggling later on whilst sewing when it is too short. Basically, this stitch is not very different from the 3-hole pamphlet stitch you may already know. I just sew from the inside to the outside. That means the thread will later sit inside the journal. So imagine this piece of paper is your signature. I will go from the inside to the outside, pull the thread through, then go from the outside to the inside, and then again from the inside to the outside. In the end, you simply move through the holes like that all the time. Okay, and then again from the outside to the inside. And now you can already see that we don't have thread on both sides yet. So you go back in the opposite direction. For the last hole, we went from outside to inside. So now we go from inside to outside. So basically you close the gaps like this. We just went from inside to outside here. So now we go from outside to inside again and close that gap. So now it is very important that you skip that middle hole. So that was our starting point, and I'll mark it for you. You completely skip this one and go into the next hole after that, from inside to outside and from outside to inside. And again from inside to outside. Now we are back at the end. You turn everything and go again from outside to inside. And you close the remaining gaps. So now we still have one gap here, and we go back inside again. And with that, the 7-hole pamphlet stitch is done in, basically the same way as the 3-hole pamphlet stitch, just with more holes. So now you just have to make sure that one thread ends up on the left and one on the right of the sewn thread. And then you simply knot the threads together or make a small bow or whatever you prefer. And you're done, your signature is sewn in. So always make sure to tighten the thread, but not too much. In this test piece, you can already see that if you pull too hard, the paper will tear. But it should also not be too loose, otherwise the signatures will move around inside your journal. Now I will sew all my signatures into my journal cover and then I will come back to you. For the sewing, I will also use this white thread. Of course, you can use anything you like. This one is a waxed and quite strong thread. You can also use embroidery thread or wool. It should just be a little stronger and more stable and not a very thin thread that tears easily. In theory, you could also use a sisal cord. You would just need larger holes, I think, and of course a needle with a larger eye. Just before I get really started, one tip for you. I always attach a small sewing clip to the thread so that it cannot accidentally slip completely through the hole while I'm sewing or when I pull on it a little harder. This is a very good way to prevent that. So I am finally finished with sewing in all of my signatures, and that's it, what it looks like now. Yeah, and that's what my spine looks from the outside. I decided to use a white thread because it blends in very nicely here and the contrast is not too strong. Well, I have to say sewing with 7 holes was a bit challenging for me, even with the lace more difficult and more work, but I really like the result. I like the smaller distances between the stitches much more than having only 2 large ones. And now I'll quickly show you what the journal looks like inside. And I'll just flip through it rather quickly. This is a pocket that I still want to glue in later, but before that I want to work on the page underneath a little more. Yeah, that's it, what my journal looks like now. As you can see, a few pages are sticking out slightly on the side, but that doesn't bother me too much. I think I actually quite like that. For me, the most important thing is that nothing sticks out at the bottom, otherwise the journal cannot stand properly. I also glued down this very torn page here, and I really like this completely grungy look. As I already told you, I left some pages quite short, cause I will add some elements to them later. This page over here you can flip out. And here we have some baking paper that I think I have already used before for some crafting projects. And I like that there is still a bit of color and glitter on it. Oh, and I have another tip for sewing. If you can't get through with your needle, especially with a thick cover or with all the laces we have now on this one, it helps to use the awl or another pointy tool from the inside and then follow that hole with the needle. And here I created a double fold out, so you can just fold it out twice. So I think the journal will offer me a lot of space for writing and working in and collecting all my memories. Because, as I already told you in the first part of this series, I mainly use my journals to collect my pieces of art and my memories. Oh yeah, the envelope was a little too long, so I just trimmed it with a decorative edge with these children's scissors. I haven't decided yet what I will do with these threads in the end. Either I will attach small charms or small objects that I collect during the year, but sometimes I also simply tie a bow and leave the threads like that. At the very end, I also added a glassine bag because towards the end of the year, there are usually many memories from Christmas and New Year's Eve, and I can store quite a lot in there. Yeah, this is kind of my naked journal for 2026 for now. As you can see, I still need to remove the pencil marks from the cover. And here we have these large pockets that I already talked about in part 1. But I still need to cover the breads. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it and that it gave you a few ideas for what you can include in a journal like this, and maybe you also picked up one or two tips. And if so, feel free to leave me a comment. I'm always happy if I can inspire someone in any way. And maybe you also have some tips, especially for making it easier to sew in the signatures. Even though I have been making junk journals for more than 4 years now, I still struggle with this part sometimes. So feel free to give me some advice. And until then, I hope we will see each other again very soon. In the next part, I will already start decorating January and February because the new kit from Sevenplaza is out now and it is very, very pretty. And now I wish you a crafty day. See you next time. Bye.